Hello, my name is Kamisha Blue, and I will be giving a brief overview of my childhood development as it pertains to physical, cognitive, and psychosocial domains of development. I was born on November the 11th, 1994, in Brewton, Alabama, and I weighed 6 pounds and 6 ounces. I was a healthy baby for the most part, although I did carry the sickle cell trait at a very young age. I was the second child of my mother's and the first child of my father's, which I can say I was very planned. From days old to 5 months, I began to take on a few extra pounds. I was not overweight around that time. As you can see, I love food. I was actually bottle fed instead of my mother doing the whole breastfeeding thing. Although they say children who are breastfed tend to be a lot smarter, I began to learn rather quickly and was able to sit up without slumping over enough to get a good picture on the right side. On the left side, I could say I was a very alert newborn. I rarely had any pictures where I was actually asleep. My mother and I. Slide 3 shows a picture roughly of me and my mother. My mother had me when she was 19 and my sister when she was 14. By her being young, she managed to make sure we were well taken care of. Although I did have my father in my life, I can say I was gradually starting to learn growth and motor skills. I began to learn how to touch and feel things with my hands, which is part of our sensory motors. 2 years old. This picture was taken on my second birthday. Although I was 2, I had yet to grow out of my big old head. My head was rather large for the rest of my body. By this age, I was working on motor development skills. Sitting up, standing, walking, and jumping were all mastered by age 2. I was a rather fast learner. Once I figured out what my legs could do, I didn't want to be picked up. Although around this age is when I was constantly sick, I was a healthy baby. Just around this age, I was constantly sick because of carrying the sickle cell trait. I was in and out of the hospital, but I did not have any setback problems where it interfered with physical development. I started saying my first words right around the time that everyone should say their first words. I did not develop at a slow pace, but rather a more steady pace. In this collage is different ages. On the right top hand side, I am writing what I call a big wheel. I am showing that at the age 3, I was able to start gripping things and not needing any assistance. In some of these photos, I began to learn cognitive development and how to apply and use it. By this time, I was using the development where I began to understand how to count numbers and be able to use them. 3 and 5 years old. During this age, I began to develop a more sense of wanting to do things on my own, as in feed myself. A lot of kids my age wanted everything to still be done for them. Although I was very close to my caregiver, my mother, I still wanted to do things on my own. I used guided practice as a visual where my mother showed me how to do certain things and I began to use them on my own by having a great memory. It is also the form of zone proximal development, which is an imaginary psychological space between what they can do or know by themselves and what they could do or know with the help. Which came from our textbook. 8 to 12 years old. Uniforms and cheer were the best parts of my elementary and middle school days. Being a cheerleader taught me how to remember cheers, stretch, and it also kept me in shape. At age 10, I would say I was developing cognitively with being creative on the cheer squad. My parents' social economic status was not very high, but we were not poor. It stated on page 211 that high socioeconomic parents children have a larger spoken vocabulary, but I would have to say by age 10, I was using very big words. I was one of the top readers in my class. Brace Face loves music. By the end of my ninth grade year, I became what people would call in high school brace face. I would shy away from smiling for fear of what people would say. I guess you could say I believe I had an imaginary audience. I began to develop my emotions where some days I felt ugly. And those were related to the psychosocial development and cognitive development. Anyways, the end of my 8th grade year, I started taking piano lessons till I was a senior in high school. Music became my life. It made me feel like I fit in some way possible. I would have to say overall, in this section of my childhood, I was going through the process of self-conscious emotions where I was embarrassed easily. Doing a comparison over time, here in these photos, I am roughly 15 or 16 years of age. As you can see, my height pretty much stayed the same. I believe I took the height of my mother because I am only about 5'0", and I am currently 21 years of age. My height had to be one of the biggest downfalls in my physical development, what I would call my early adolescence. Sophomore year, I began to develop my own personality, which is a constant blend of emotions, temperate thought, and behavior that makes a person unique. And it was also found in our textbook. I also learned the different characteristics, ways of feeling, thinking, and acting, which is all combined into our psychosocial development. By age 16 going on 17, I had learned a lot and also been through enough to know how to adapt and accept things. Spanish Club. During my 11th grade year, I was honored to be a part of the Spanish Club where I was able to travel and dance in Spanish. It taught me how to embrace other cultures. Overall, it was a great experience. In Piaget's theory, I learned to understand everyone in the club has shared intentionalities. We all endured the same goals throughout the year. I don't know about anyone else, but I am a daddy's girl. Here in this picture is me and my father. We shared an unbreakable bond because my father was a great dad whom I never seen complain or ask why him. You see, he has sickle cell disease, and it has been so many times I could have lost him. I also carry the sickle cell trait, as I stated in slides before. Sickle cell is very common in African Americans. It can skip generations as well. Because my grandparents both had the trait, my father being the oldest ended up with the disease while it skipped right over my uncle, and they are a year apart. Also in the slide is a selfie of myself where I began to embrace my own appearance. Senior prom was one of the best nights of my life. Growing into a beautiful young lady, I had gradually emerged into sense of self, acknowledging my self-worth and self-concept, and also self-regulation. By this time, I had mastered the psychosocial part of my life. I had developed socialization, which is the process of developing habits, skills, and motives that make me responsible. During this time of my life, I had developed into what we call a young adult. With the guidance of my family, I was able to branch out and make my own mistakes. Gradually, I developed the best part of cognitive development, and that is self-esteem, which is judgment a person makes about his or her self-worth, found in our textbook. Four eyes, Glasses? I don't think so. For some reason, during my late high school slash freshman year of college, I developed another physical experience where I had to wear glasses. I hated glasses, but I wanted to see as well. When I started wearing glasses, most people were already wearing them just to look smart. Glasses was a big change for me because I had to adapt to wearing them all the time and not just for reading. When I was younger, I did not have any problems seeing or hearing. I can remember getting regular checkups. Also, my physical appearance as a young woman started to form. I grew out of the baby face that I had for years. Young adult. Transformation Thursday. Throughout this entire process, I learned different physical, cognitive, and psychosocial developments. I managed to discuss my physical appearance, sensory, motor skills, and health. With cognitive theory, I talked about reasoning, thinking, and learning. And lastly, psychosocial development was my social relationships, emotions, and personality. Overall, I know a lot more about myself just by using these theories of development. And this concludes my childhood development. Thank you. All about Kamisha.